Alright guys, so just done with a 10k run, personal best of about 45 minutes, max effort, super cool. In today's video, we're gonna talk about motivation. So what is that drives human behavior, why we do what we do, why we behave the way we behave. And so let's get inside in the studio and let's get started. All right, back in the studio, indoor, coffee is ready. And let's get started with this talk about motivation, especially motivation in competitive sport. So first of all, we start with what is motivation, defining motivation. Well, motivation refers to the force that drives our behavior, and it can be understood as the direction and energy of human behavior. So with this definition, it assumes that motivation is basically composed by two main factors, direction and energy. So let's start with direction first. If we define motivation in terms of direction, it implies the existence of an end target, of an aim, of a goal. And we can fairly assume that if there is no goal, there is no motivation. However, the opposite is not entirely true. So if there is a goal, it doesn't mean that there is motivation. Another aspect to consider here is that how we understand and how we define this goal that we have. One first reflection about this is that goals not always are conscious. So we are not always aware of the goal that we want to achieve. We have many different goals throughout the day, throughout weeks, throughout months, throughout years, and for our lives. However, most of those goals are in fact not explicit. We don't really clarify or define our goals entirely. That's a key aspect. Well, once we understand our goals, once we reflect upon our goals, they become we become aware of them. And when we are aware of them, it's worth to think about how we get involved with those kind of goals. So let's have an example. In my practice with my clients, athletes, for example, we can take one athlete and try to understand if this person, if she or he is actually involved with the goal according to a task perspective or an ego perspective. So let's delve into this difference about task involvement or ego involvement with goals. So we're talking about states of goal involvement here. So if the athlete is, let's say, task involved first, he or she wants to develop mastery rather than demonstrating ability. So it's a very important difference here, because when we want to develop mastery, then it means that the task itself, the activity itself, the behavior that we are enacting is itself rewarding, and therefore we feel joy, satisfaction, fulfillment out of the action that we are doing. Rather, when we want to demonstrate ability, it means that we are engaging in the activity, in the specific task or the specific behavior, because we want to outperform others or because we want to achieve an end state. And therefore, the focus is external. The locus of control is external to us. Rather, in the mastery developing case, then the focus is internal. The locus of control is internal. Therefore, the achievement behavior that the mastery oriented athlete or the athlete that is task involved in the activities that he or she is doing, so the achievement behaviors will be adaptive. such that the individual is more likely to persist in case of failure, is more likely to exert effort for a longer period of time, and it's also more likely. It is also more likely that the athlete will select challenging tasks. So when this occurs, most often the athlete, the person, the high performer in general, will develop intrinsic motivation toward the task, toward the activity itself. Rather, if we have an athlete that is ego involved, it means that the athlete is trying to demonstrate normative ability or to avoid demonstrating inability. So in this sense, the comparison is not against himself or herself, but rather is against someone else, some opponents, some external factors that are somehow driving the behavior. In this case, the athlete wants to compare himself or herself against others. So if that occurs, it's very likely that the athlete, in this case, will develop external motivation, extrinsic motivation. Now, let's focus for a moment on the energetic aspect of motivation. So when we define motivation in terms of energy, it implies that this energy could be weaker or stronger according to different possible factors. So then the question is, what does this force or energy depends upon? And this is a very, very important aspect, because what is not really understood in practice from athletes, coaches, or also with teams, for example, is that the energy and the effort, the continuous sustainable energy and effort that we put in our task is actually depending upon how we define the goal. And the more the goal is defined in a way that it's aligned to our own identity, then the stronger will be our energy, our effort, our sustainable, continuous effort to reach that goal. So that's this aspect of matching the goal, the definition and the understanding of our own goals with our identity is crucial to create intrinsic, sustainable, intrinsic motivation. All right, so we have defined motivation and some of the components of motivation. Now let's reflect upon the role of the athlete, of the individual in the world, in reality. So we are proactive organisms. We are individuals are actively engaged and proactive in their interaction with the environment. And that's based on the assumption that we all are inherently motivated to feel connected with others, to belong to small groups and bigger groups, and to feel connected and to feel affects, emotions, and relatedness with other people. Also, we are inherently motivated to function effectively in a given environment, to be competent at doing what we do. And finally, we feel inherently motivated to feel a sense of personal initiative, of autonomy in doing what we do. So those needs are drivers, are inherent drivers of behavior, and therefore in the tasks and behavior and actions that we take part every day, the more we feel connected and related to others, the more we feel a sense of competence, and the more we feel autonomous in what we are doing, the more we feel intrinsically motivated in the action that we do. So that's why, for example, simply put, diet plans usually do not work per se, because it's an imposition from external source of information on what we need to eat. Otherwise, when we first develop behaviors, tasks, and understanding of nutrition, which grows our sense of relatedness, competence, and autonomy in what we are reading, then we lose weight more consistently for a long period of time, and all those small steps that we take actually reinforce our new identity of a healthy person, and therefore in the long term, not just strict based compulsory dieting and nutrition work, not at all, but rather the our own self-determination of that given behavior that reinforce a new identity, a long-term change within us. And that's perfectly applicable in the domain of sports, in competitive sports. So as a coach and clinical psychologist, I have experience with athletes, for example, that have been struggling with their performance, even though their motivation seemed to be very, very high. But then when you really try to delve into it and understand why they are behaving the way they did, and what was the real driver of that behavior, then you can always understand extrinsic motives and external factors that were driving the behavior, the actions, the daily tasks that those athletes needed to complete and to forego to achieve the final goal, let's say. So, for example, that could be, pleasing a parent, or doing exactly what the coach was ordering and imposing from outside, and everything was related. Everything was connected with the idea of winning or losing, rather than developing, mastering, and enjoying the process of competing and being there. In other instances, another athlete, a football player, he was feeling he wasn't feeling part of the group. He wasn't feeling related. But this is tricky. So not in terms of the team that he was part with, but in terms of the closer relationships. So his significant others were not supportive of that change of environment that he had. So the story was that he changed team, and in the team he was supported. He was one of the strongest guys, the most talented guys in the team. The coach was the coach had a very high reputation of him, putting him in place in the main team from the very beginning of the season. However, because of the change of the environment and change of time, he wasn't feeling related to his best friends, to his family at home, and that discrepancy wasn't clear. Maybe it's obvious when you reflect upon it, but at the very beginning it's not clear. So we need to feel related to others, we need to feel autonomous in what we do, and we need to feel competent in what we do. And those three kind of feelings, those three needs that must be satisfied, we must understand them in a broader sense, in our holistic sense. Okay, but how do we apply this knowledge in practice? If you're an athlete, a coach, or you're part of a team, or you are an executive, a manager, or an artist, or a performer in general, how do you apply those concepts and ideas in practice? let's take a look at the structure of the brain. According to the triune brain theory developed by Paul MacLean in the 60s, our brains developed according to three different systems that reflects the phylogenetic development of human species. So there is the reptilian complex, the inner part of the brain, which is composed by the brainstem, the cerebellum, and basically regulates physiological homeostasis, maintenance of the brain, and basically survival. Things like, for example, heartbeat, digestion, and breathing, and all those automatic processes that are within our body. Then there is the limbic system, which is basically the mammal brain, and is the first system that basically links emotions to memory. And this is composed by the amygdala at hippocampus, and is associated with emotions. So basically it's the headquarter of our emotion. And then there is the neocortex, the gray matter, the latest part, or the youngest, let's say, part of our brain in Homo sapiens. This part of the brain is basically the brain that has, in which our cognitions happens, and so it's related to cognitive abilities, memory, and language, and that ability that we only have in logical functioning and in being aware of our conscience. So according to this structure of the brain, we can also talk about motivational systems. So basically, the reptilian brain has its own motivations, which are basically feeding and exploring, and of course also reproduction. Then when we talk about the limbic system, there are different motivations, and that relates with caregiving. So for example, we want to be cared, and we also strive for caring others. But we also strive for hierarchies, to define hierarchies across our relationships. And then when we talk instead about the neocortical system, we have all those other more complex motivations related to belongingness of groups, belongingness of larger social structures, and definition of values, languages, decision-making plans, and long-term goals. And all are related to our own conscience. With this conceptualization of the brain and this brain structure and this different motivational system, we can understand motivation in high-stake context as competitive sports, because we can really disentangle motivation and across different levels of analysis and across different developmental stages of the motivational process that unfolds itself when we try to achieve a goal, or when we have to perform a given behavior. And so in practice, when I work with high performers, we want to I want to understand together, we want to disentangle what is more relevant for the identity of the athlete, for example. Which kind of developmental state, motivational developmental state is he or she right now, and how do we promote intrinsic motivation and task involvement across these three different levels of analysis. And therefore, when you try to have this very deep and profound understanding of the motivational system and processes that develops throughout the achievement behaviors of an athlete, then you can try to work, try to reframe, try to engage with the athlete in a mastery approach, in a higher end, value related kind of goal. Because, by the way, when a goal, when we fail to reach a goal, then what we do? So in the long term, for sustainable intrinsic and mastery related motivation, two main components must be there. So one is the relationship of our is the alignment of our actions and behaviors with our own identity, and then also the definition of an overarching set of values that can be related to different goals. Therefore, when a goal will miss, or when we will fail to reach a goal, it's not a problem, because the goal itself is protected or is embedded within the bigger value that basically cover the goal. So different goals will be related to different values and different life missions that we might have. And you see this every time with athletes as they develop as person, from young adults or teenagers, of being teenagers and be talented athletes, to more complete and ready athletes to cope with the problems that are related to life. And in fact, true champions, those that keep winning in a sustainable and long-term continuous way, are exact those athletes that has everything aligned: their goals, their identity, and their values. All right, let's then summarize the 3 steps that you need to do to work with motivation in high competitive contexts. Number 1, define your values. Number 2, define the goals that will help you to live up with those values. And then number 3, define the specific actions that you need to undertake and that will reinforce that intrinsic motivation in the specific tasks and activities that you have to do to achieve those goals. Given that said, I would like to pass this on to you, and let me ask you, what is your experience with lack of motivation? Have you ever experienced that emptiness and frustration that comes with lack of intrinsic motivation, that lack of enjoyment of the activities that you once loved to do? Let me know in the comments below, or if you have any questions about motivation and how to work with motivation, I will be super happy to answer you and to follow up with you. And thank you for checking out this video. I'll see you soon in the next one. Bye.